Welcome back to the Storyrant podcast. I'm your host, Eric Malikyte, and I'm joined by CT Phipps. And today we're going to be talking about Daredevil Born Again, and whether or not Wilson Fisk is an allegory for Trump. CT Phipps, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm CT Phipps. I'm the author of the Supervillainy Saga, Cthulhu Armageddon, and a bunch of other things you probably haven't read. If you have, thank you. And yes, we are here to talk about a character who has been doing Trump-like things even before Trump, back when it's with Fred.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, this is a really obvious video title. Yeah, it is a Trump allegory, you know? I mean, I was running this by my wife, and she's like, yeah, it's really, really on the nose. And what's interesting about this is that, you know, Trump has been the villain in pretty much every 80s movie and movies going forward through the 90s. There are tons of video essays on this. And it's really not surprising. But the real question is it a good allegory?
Well, there's a very interesting thing there, because I'll actually disagree with you in a very big way. There is Trump elements in this, but I would argue that he is a much more universal story and parable in the story itself, based on specific comic arcs as well. And if I had to say what the politics of I was about to say season 4, but yeah, Born Again, I would say that the Trump allegory is one of the lesser ones there. His fandom is actually, I'd argue, much closer to Trump's fandom than Wilson Fisk is being portrayed in the show itself.
Oh yeah. The whole cult of personality thing, it's I wouldn't even say it's on the nose. I think it's very I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing that it is on the nose because it's kind of an important talking point right now. But I honestly think this is a kind of a good jumping off point for more important conversations to have surrounding this show. And only 4 episodes are out at the time of recording this right now. But I think a really good one is, what do you do when you feel like there's no way to win, no way forward as far as progress, as far as justice is concerned? Because with Matt Murdock's character in this season, it really feels like he's down and out, and he's like backed up against the wall the whole time. And that's kind of how we feel as a whole in society right now with everything that's going on, right?
Yeah. The thing is with the Trump allegory is we have a lot of those right now.
Mm-hmm.
So many that are drowning. People were even talking about Captain America, Brave New World, and the giant red rage monster, which that actually wasn't the case. I'd argue it was much closer to a Biden allegory for strange reasons that are beyond the topic of this there. But going on with it, there's a lot of actually subtle things being said with Born Again regarding the quote-unquote Trump phenomenon of the fandom. Let's just call it MAGA. Or in this case, Fisk can fix it. With their own hats there. Yeah. The New Yorkers are portrayed in this case as representing people just so sick of everything not working that they'll do anything, take a risk on a known felon, a person that in the universe who has gone to prison for murder, among other crimes, and police officers being killed, and God knows what else from seasons 1 through 3. And they'll say, it can't be worse than what we've got already. Someone who is an organized crime boss will maybe at least wreck the system enough that we will have radical change. And that is a very scary thought, that people are become so desperate that they're willing to roll the dice on someone who's a terrifying monster. And we've had that happen many times in history, and not just with the idea behind Donald Trump and the popular perception of him, which I think is more important here than the actual real life persona of New York's real estate magnate and president. I have my own feelings on that, but Wilson Fisk is a character who dates all the way back to late 60s, and he's a character that draws from many in real life New York City giants, but also fictionalized representations. of these real life people. And Maltese Falcon, Gutman, who obviously was the visual inspiration for Wilson Fisk. And the idea that New York is rallying behind this person, again, says more about what the show thinks the public itself is feeling right now, the frustration and the anger. And it's reflected not only in the public itself, but the characters of Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock. They are just up to here with the way things are in their own separate ways. Wilson wants to gentrify New York, which is his solution, since the let me turn that off. Since the first season, and Matt Murdock, of course, became Daredevil because he just can't deal with the corruption and violence of his own life. And his solution is to protect the people rather than try and get a better type of citizen in New York as Wilson is.
Right. But what's really interesting about the show so far too, it's also highlighting, the bureaucracy and the problem with it. It almost represents the Democrats and how dug in with the bureaucracy and with, the corporate money in politics and things like that, because it's almost impossible to get certain things done with the way things are set up, with how much red tape there are. There are very good reasons for why that is, but it's really easy for lobbyists and for, politicians to abuse that if they want to. So when someone like Trump comes in or Elon Musk comes in and just starts wrecking shit, it's like a Jenga tower. It all just collapses. And I think what's going to happen in this arc is you're going to see something similar to that happening with New York City. Obviously, there's going to be the whole superhero element, but I was really kind of surprised that Disney was willing to allow such a coherent political message to be used in one of their stories, one of their Marvel stories, because I'll be honest, like a lot of Marvel shows, movies have stupid politics. Like looking back at Captain America and the Winter Soldier, or Falcon and the Winter Soldier, rather, like the politics in that didn't make a whole lot of sense. It's like they were trying to do two things at once with the resistance group, right? And then he has this, as Captain America, Sam Wilson has this speech at the end that just ends with "do better." And something, because I've been getting involved with activism and 5051 and Indivisible and whatnot. And I've been actually going to these protests and, letting my voice be heard along with everyone else that is coming together in this moment. We often don't realize how much power we have as, citizens. We are the Constitution of the United States states "we the people" at the very beginning of it. We the people have the power. And one thing that I think a lot of media doesn't get right is, the solution for this isn't some guy dressing up as, Daredevil. Obviously, that's going to be really entertaining to see. But it's, it's everyone coming together for a common goal, collectivism, basically, right?
Well, I have a lot that I could say about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and that'd be worth its own podcast there. Oddly enough, I generally go against the grain with the ending of that series that you said, "do better," because a lot of people read it as Sam Wilson is asking the politicians to make a moral, informed choice, and obviously that causes Americans on both sides of the political divide to go, "That is some complete bullshit."
Right.
But actually, for me, I always thought that was getting something deeper in the fact that it was about the optics of being Captain America. Sam, the Falcon, could never encourage all of America to rally behind him the way Captain America can, even as a different man wearing the mantle. And I always thought it was a very interesting case there that the Antifa coded characters of the Flag Smashers were screwing up their message because in the show they were actually as violent as they were being accused of being, and all that do was alienating the people that were not hearing their message as a result. And
Yeah, which is really interesting because what we're seeing with, like, in real life, 5051 and Indivisible are actually, their message is to protest as peacefully as possible, because as we
yeah,
see in history, it is nonviolent protest that typically is the most effective arbiter for change. Like, you need to rally about 3.5% of the population is what I've seen in studies.
yes, it becomes it's something that the police and let's just say the man very much want to vilify protesters and paint them as violent, ignorant reactionaries when it very
Right.
much is usually counter progressive forces that are following that kind of stereotype. I'm not naming names, but I probably should. But going on with that, getting back to the Fisk presidency, so to speak, as they're treating the mayorship in this case. One character that really jumps out at me is the character of Sheila Riviera, who is Fisk's second in command there, who has the goal, as far as she is concerned, to block Fisk with all this red tape and so on. She thinks
Hmm.
she's riding herd and she can control Fisk, who was elected on this populist, get it done platform, and he immediately wants to start doing massive changes. And she's like, no, no, we need to do yes, why, and do this and fill out these forms and so on. All of this in episode 4, and she thinks she's in control because she controls the bureaucracy or can throw up these hurdles. And we know Wilson Fisk is just going to smash through them like a bull through
Battering
a
ram.
yeah. And she doesn't realize also that she's putting her own life in danger because the law doesn't mean anything to Wilson Fisk,
Right.
and that is yes. And I think that actually does reflect some people's opinion on how Washington and smaller state governments work. They think they can control this populist uprising and
Hmm.
feeling of discontent there just by putting them like the rats through a maze. And we're increasingly finding out that's not working for anyone because the people are angry and are decide and when they reach the point that there's want change, they will demand it and they will get it whether they want to or not. The results.
Right, and I think that as soon as Matt Murdock puts the costume back on, Wilson is just going to twist that in his favor. You know, I mean, we'll see. Honestly, like, aside from like politics or anything, the opening for the show had me a little confused because I was like, we're getting a lot of far off shots of Daredevil here. The choreography felt weird. It felt very CG heavy, but like as soon as he comes back into action, when those two corrupt cops try to, you know, do their thing later on, spoilers, I guess. Like, the action was just fucking fantastic in that scene.
Oh yeah. Well, there's definitely Disney has plenty to spend on the acting budget there, but I also feel like a lot of people complaining about the CG versus the live action practical effects and the one shots and so much that made the original Daredevil. Well, Charlie Cox is 10 years older. He's in his
Yeah.
40s. Yeah, he'll have stunt doubles and so on there, but certain accommodations have to be made for the passage of time, in my opinion. He was definitely a man in great shape and still is, but come on, you're probably not going to see 60-year-old Vincent D'Onofrio beating the crap out of him for
Right.
a realistically manner. Uh,
well, but also, like, to come back to the other sort of segue topic that I had in mind, what do you do when you're backed in a corner and it feels like you don't have any power? I think that is a very, very important theme throughout this show right now, that Matt Murdock and his firm do feel like they're being backed into a corner right now. And how do you think that's going to evolve throughout the rest of the show?
I think that Daredevil Born Again is getting a lot of crap on the internet, just like every other Disney property, right outside the gate there. And there were reshoots, and people are obviously questioning like what is new, what is not. But I do think, as you say, this is a very solidly written story with a very direct message, and I don't think that's much been changed. Uh, and a lot of people are, oh, there's no Foggy and no Karen, and I love both actors and the characters as well there. But the supporting cast in this one actually all have specific roles that I really like and fit into the larger scheme of things. We just haven't gotten a chance to fully know them yet. For instance, one of the most fascinating characters here is Daniel Blake, who's played by Michael Gandolfini, and he is the Fisk fanboy, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't really understand what he loves about someone so repellent as Fisk, who is awkward, weird, and not really a typical politician. Even before you get into the fact he's a murderer, and then you realize that's the reason.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, there are so many people utterly sick of the system as king that they're moving well away from the center, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
to radical solutions. And we have the Fisk radical solution, which is the beginnings of Devil's Reign in the comics. And we can say fascism, but that's not precisely what Wilson Fisk is there, but authoritarianism at the very least.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, and Daniel has idolizes Fisk as this quote unquote self made man illusion and all these lies, and he is deluded about just how dangerous this man is. Because when he's apologizing and fawning before Fisk sincerely, that saves that man's life.
Yeah.
Because Fisk would kill him, and he doesn't ever realize that because he has an image in his head, because he wants someone to be the quote unquote hero. And
Yeah.
we have Matthew Murdock having gotten himself out of being Daredevil, and we all know he's going to return to the mask because it's the Daredevil show there. But what he's really done is gotten himself out of just trying it all to quote unquote fix things. He's working as a corporate lawyer. He's trying to live inside the system as a normal person because Foggy's death traumatized him to the belief that everything I do just hurts people.
Yeah.
And, talking himself out of that is going to be a season arc, and plenty of people are like, just put on the costume and beat up the bad guys. And that's not what the story is about there. It's about realizing why vigilantes come into existence, quote unquote folk heroes. Because
Right.
the origin of the superhero is the Great Depression. Because back then, same issue, economic disparity, politicians not listening to you or doing anything that you want to look to someone new. Wilson Fisk is not Franklin Roosevelt. Let's just say that. But no one trusted the cops in the 1930s. Can you imagine why? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
we're getting
And,
definitely into
and the funny thing about this is that so I am the host of a history YouTube channel, so I read a lot of scripts that are based in fact. They are produced for entertainment purposes, but we fact check like crazy, and yeah, that era, specifically the 1800s, was extremely lawless. You had the robber barons that were basically four people had all the wealth in the world. Politics is typically,
yeah.
especially propaganda, is used to divide the working class from the rich, and this is. I don't know if the show's gonna go in this direction because Wilson Fisk was very much a social elite. He's sort of gone down, like in what is it? Vanessa was like, you really want to take this pay cut to go into politics when this is not the status that we're used to and what have you. When politics is used by the rich, it is almost always a type of weapon to oppress the working class. So I'm not sure where they're going with this, but I'm hoping that it reflects some of the themes that we're talking about today. The oppression, the way that the depression was a symptom, basically, when the markets collapsed, and then finally the final nail in the coffin during the Great Depression was when tariffs were put in place and all basically foreign trade dried up. That made it way worse.
Oh, yeah.
The whole reason why FDR and all of FDR's New Deal policies were put in place is because it was a compromise to keep things so that full on revolution didn't break out, because that's where we were at that time.
There's a couple of fascinating facts there that I'm just going to throw in that are perhaps sobering in retrospect. One, the first was Hoover, in a way to try and deal with all the unrest, had his own solution regarding immigration. That was Operation Wet. I'm going to say, not going to say the rest of the word there, but it
Oh,
was,
wow.
yes, thousands and thousands of Mexican American citizens and people that were accused of being illegal immigrants were just grabbed off the street by his forces and then deported against their will. Can't imagine why we don't teach that anymore.
Yeah.
Yes,
Wonder why.
history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. And second of all, it's kind of fascinating that the New Deal was actually heavily opposed by the American Communist Party, which was once actually quite vibrant right before World War II. And it was one of those things where they kept shooting themselves in the foot, one by actively ignoring the Soviet Union was a really shitty place.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, often taking they were getting their money oftentimes from Moscow, and that influenced their message. So when Stalin said something to the effect of like, "Let's start ignoring this racial equality element that seems to be pissing off so many Americans," well, that pissed off all the Black American communists who were a substantial portion of that.
Right.
And then briefly they were like always talking about opposing the Nazis. Can't imagine why they were doing that there. And then during the brief Warsaw Pact, they were told not to start opposing Nazis. And that, well, everyone who was wondering whether or not they were taking their orders from Moscow pretty much got the message from there, even when they reversed it.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
yes, foreign interference in America as well.
It's nothing new.
Growing, yeah,
It's gotten
but
more covert. It's gotten more insidious, definitely. But
oh,
so the
but yeah,
interesting thing, especially about the character that you mentioned, Wilson's like a lapdog, basically, is what he is.
yeah,
He's a reflection of real Americans that are just fed up with the system as it is. But like how they fall down this rabbit hole is really interesting, and because these are just regular people that fall down this rabbit hole and end up thinking these horrible things. It's all of this started on 4chan, by the way, with like neo-Nazis thinking
oh,
that
there's a
you know
fascinating story I can throw there. I was actually there on 4chan because I was a Warhammer 40K fan and tabletop gaming,
yeah.
and I was there when Q was created. I knew it
Wow.
started as a game, as a little secret game there, and right before they started posting it on Facebook, and all these elderly posters were like, "Oh my God, is this true?" And I'm like, "Yes, clearly a guy with top secret clearance is going to play children's word games and post his secrets on a board full of bronies."
Yeah. But more than that,
Yeah,
like they
yeah.
actively organize this strategy. Of it's basically debate bro tactics taken to the extreme of never use the language that people don't like because people hate Nazis, right?
Yeah.
So instead, you use all of these dog whistles in their place, and then you never,
Oh yeah.
you're always like antagonistic in your debates. Like you never acknowledge when a good point is made. You just
Oh yeah.
pick apart like random things in an argument or what have you that will seem like that will anger your opposition and then make them seem like the crazy ones. That's their
Oh yeah.
entire thing.
Now, I quote someone that you may have heard of, Jean-Paul Sartre.
Oh yeah.
Yes, just to show that there is nothing new under the sun, he had a very specific quote about anti Semitism and how it was propagated throughout Europe. He said, "Never believe the anti Semites are completely unaware of the absurdity of their replies. They know that their remarks are frivolous, open to challenge, but they are amusing themselves. For it is their adversary who is obliged to use words responsibly since he believes in words."
Right. Exactly. So it's very much like what's that sound like? The current version of the internet troll, right?
Oh yes, I mean, it's like this is the way people have always done there. There have always been people who don't actually need to win an argument because they're not arguing from logic. They're arguing from emotion. And that's something that was also brought up by Umberto Eco, author of The Name of the Rose and many other fascinating books. Very smart man, but he grew up in fascist Italy.
Right.
So he knows fascism, and he said something to the effect of summarized the way you know fascism. But he says it's very hard to define because fascism is inherently not logical. It is emotion based.
Right. Yeah.
If you can
100%.
win on the gut reaction of these people are making this world worse, if you get rid of these people, the world is better. This guy will fix it. I am following the path of my ancestors and honoring tradition or whatever.
Right.
All these little points there that get you in a mindset of seeing so much red you stop caring. That is what fascism is. But you
Yes.
can't define that philosophically because it's not a philosophical model.
Right. Right. So, like, Wilson Fisk isn't really doing that per se, but he is using tactics that are similar,
Yeah.
especially with his, Fisk can fix it slogan,
Yes.
you know.
That's the thing there. He keeps going back to Daniel because Wilson Fisk actually has no real plan that a sane person would follow because going back to traditional politics there, rich people in politics have nothing they can sell the working class.
Right.
I'm going to slash your wages and benefits and keep the
Or
difference.
or
Yes.
take away your Social Security, your Medicaid, and your Medicare, and
Yes.
ban unions. By the way,
Yes, the richest man in the world obviously doesn't need money.
yeah,
Okay, too much reality there, but going with that there, they don't have to sell, but they don't sell that. They sell this person is the problem there, and in this case, they go with
it's
the
superheroes, right?
yes, and that's a sure. Let's go with it. X-Men are about minorities, so why not? But yes, Wilson Fisk is blaming them for the vigilante and the lawlessness. And here's the thing: Vanessa Fisk keeps trying to keep peace between the gangs, and Wilson says, "Ignore it, ignore it.
Let
Don't
them
get
kill each
involved in this."
other.
Yes, and Vanessa's like wondering what the fuck are you doing here? And what I think they're going to, and this is purely a prediction, Wilson wants there to be gang wars, problems, and things to go to chaos because then he'll be able to offer himself as the alternative.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm going
I definitely saw that coming too, because like he'll pick up the pieces afterward too. If he wants to go back to that sort of like, if politics fails him, he'll still be able to go back and be the kingpin or what have you.
and this is where I'm going to. We also are going to something I know you've been chomping at the bit to: the police.
Oh yeah,
Yes, that I'm surprised that we got this along into the discussion without bringing up the Frank Castle Punisher fanboys who are
oh my
engaged in.
god.
Yes,
Yeah, I put that in my notes, and yeah, the fact that Frank is like unwilling to even acknowledge that they are kind of his fault. You know, he used to be a cop. He hates cops, and you know,
yes.
um,
Well, yeah, yeah. I'm going on with this thing. It's obviously inspired by the very real element
mhm.
of police and military lionizing the Punisher, and it's gotten to the point that the Punisher symbol is now considered a white supremacy symbol in some places and
Right.
employments there. And it's kind of extra funny there because it puts people like me who are anarchists who are actually fans of reading the Punisher, not making him a lifestyle choice in a rather irritated place that we can't wear the shirt anymore. But going on with that, Disney addressing this is really smart on their part there because if they ever want to use that multi-million-dollar movie and video game franchise again, they have to. But yeah, Frank Castle is someone who I expected to have a stronger reaction to this kind of thing there at the start. But it also fits that he's not going to be able to face that because it immediately calls into question his way of doing things. It's like,
Right.
I'm just going
Right.
to
And
kill
he
all the criminals.
like throughout Daredevil season 2, he was so like you couldn't say anything to shake his worldview. You know, he seemed to win more arguments with Matt than Matt seemed to, get through to him on things. And it's very much like this is a reflection of that, but I think if the character is going to be useful later on with this, if they continue producing this show, he's going to have to come to a realization at some point. He's going to have a character arc.
Yeah, I'm going to take a brief break to say that there's actually two kinds of Punisher in the comics, and obviously every character has like multiple versions of themselves. Batman has like 8, even
Right.
Superman. Yeah, the Punisher comes in two general forms. There's the Garth Ennis Punisher, which is this implacable serial killer, one man Terminator-esque black and white worldview creation that is pretty much inhuman. He never changes and never compromises. But there's also the Greg Rucker Punisher, who is a lot more, uh, let's just say, nuanced kind of character. I think the Netflix version and now the Disney Plus version is going to be the more. This is a Punisher who, in a, I'm not going to say is sane, but has a lot more rationale to this point. There, the criminals in the Marvel universe and the Marvel Cinematic Universe are effectively above the law. The Kingpin has been sent to prison once or twice there, but he's back, more powerful than ever. Now he's the mayor. These people are ones that cannot be dealt with the law, and they have weapons that are capable of fighting off the government well there. And the Punisher in that insane situation is reacting in a possibly sane way.
Right.
But it's clearly not helping the situation either, because the Punisher's been at this 10 years in universe, and crime has clearly not changed.
Yeah.
If not, it got.
It's kind of a similar thing to Batman too. Whenever, especially on-screen versions of Batman, never try to they very rarely address the corruption or how deep the corruption in the GCPD and Gotham's government goes. They're always kind of playing lip service to it, but like Gotham is an eldritch abomination, basically.
Yes, there's a very funny essay I did. It was actually a really short one, but I said something to the effect of like, Batman has always suffered with various controversies, and one of the latest ones was like, is Batman a fascist, being the billionaire who punches poor people? And I'm like, actually, I'd argue Batman is a really great argument about systemic problems rather than so-called one great man of history at that point. Batman can't solve Gotham's problems not because he's not punching enough criminals. Batman can't solve the problems because every other billionaire is not
right.
doing shit.
So in the DCAU, Bruce is very much a billionaire who hates other billionaires. He funds the Justice League. He does all sorts of humanitarian stuff. And what a lot of people don't realize about Batman is that in the comics, at least, he does all the things that they complain about movie Batman not doing.
And every other billionaire in Gotham, there's plenty of them who are supervillains. Grant Morrison noted this as well. He created like multiple versions, and there was also the Court of Owls, which is another issue. So, like, Batman can't fix Gotham because there's every other millionaire in Gotham is looting the place simultaneously.
Right. So I think similar to how the French funded the American Revolution, Bruce Wayne would basically have to fund a revolution.
Oh, yes.
And isn't that sort of what he's doing with the Justice League?
It is kind of interesting because that actually gets into another element of the Daredevil Born Again, to bring it back there. Vigilantes are serving as a representation of the populace taking the law into their own hands once the system of law has completely failed the individuals.
Right.
And yes, America, hasn't really ever had true quote-unquote superheroes, but it does have an actual vigilante history. And I was making a commentary on Watchmen that part of the reason that it's such a utter piss take on all superheroes is Alan Moore doesn't realize that vigilantes have a history of not just being of the establishment, but of oppressed minorities in America as well there. He made the character of Hooded Justice to be like a Klansman because that was what he immediately thought of when he thought of quote-unquote vigilantes.
Huh.
But yes, one of the things there was in the HBO TV show, they had Hooded Justice actually being a black man because Black Americans have their own histories of vigilantes to go to justice. Mm-hmm. Because, shockingly enough, many of them did not believe the police could be trusted for...
I don't know why.
All of American history.
That's sarcasm, by the way. That's very much sarcasm.
Well, I if you're watching this show and haven't picked up on that being sarcasm, I think you
right. I think my audience knows what my politics are at this point.
Yeah, I'm going to go with further where there's the thing was with the Punisher fanboys among the police are actually frustrated with this situation. They're taking the ones that are going to the extreme and carrying out extrajudicial executions now, and they were ready to kill Matt. They were ready to kill that witness. They were beating up that confidential informant, and one of them, probably not Frank Castle, was the one to execute Hector Alia, who is of course very much coded as not just a vigilante superhero in general, but a protector of the Puerto Rican community in New York.
Very similar to what's going on right now.
Yes.
Especially with Native Americans.
Yes,
too.
when
That's
people not rely on the system to survive and enforce justice and societal norms, they will create their own separate parallel system, and people will judge these people to be criminals
yeah.
because of,
Yeah. So what's really interesting about Daredevil and what I've found interesting about him is that, very much like the duality is Matt Murdock being a lawyer. How do you coexist with also being a vigilante? Because those two things shouldn't work,
I know,
and that's where a
and
lot of friction comes. But I wonder if they're going to sort of have him, for lack of a better word, or phrase, a come to Jesus moment when he realizes system's fucked anyway. So,
yeah,
you know.
that's the thing. Matt Murdock is an interesting character because his Catholicism actually came from Frank Miller, who previously he was mostly non. I'm not going to say that's non-religious, but let's just say it never came up. But the Catholicism came because Frank Miller is like, he's a lawyer by day and a vigilante by night. Someone with that much contradiction about themselves has to be Catholic.
Yeah. I mean,
It's Frank Miller's joke. Don't blame
right.
me for it. Yeah. But going on with that, actually, Frank Miller himself was motivated by the fact he was mugged in the 70s. And he was living in New York, and New York had severe problems in that situation, especially with crime. And that had caused him such emotional turmoil and pain, the fear for his life and this situation. It caused him to start writing Daredevil, who had previously been a swashbuckling romantic kind of character, into the dark, gritty, brooding superhero he did there. And later, Frank Miller would go over to DC and do the exact same thing with Batman, or maybe it was in reverse. But
Yeah.
that's a reason why both of these characters made their such dramatic shifts.
And like the thing with his Batman, like especially Dark Knight Returns, the more you look at it, like Frank Miller has always been crazy. There's a lot of weird, problematic shit in the Dark Knight Returns. Like,
Frank, Frank Miller has three things: prostitutes, ninjas, and grit.
right. So, and that grit means, anything goes. It's a lot of it is for shock value, I feel, but
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
always feel like he understands what what he's talking about or what he's trying to portray. What is the core theme of your work? It's kind of always all over the place and always has been, except for year one. Year one seems pretty fucking focused.
yes. Frank Miller is one of those guys I think of as a kind of a horseshoe. He is someone who hates the rich and has progressive politics, right? But so extreme that he somehow rounds up back into being right wing.
Right. It's really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are some panels that I could toss up on screen right now, but I won't. But
There's some
they're
passages that will be monetized on YouTube.
right. Exactly. But yeah, and I haven't read Frank Miller's Daredevil in a really long time, so I practically don't remember much about it other than it being a dark and gritty reboot.
Yeah. What I was going to do is I actually recognize a lot of these Daredevil stories that come from the later past Frank reboot. I mentioned that Wilson Fisk becoming mayor of New York is the Devil's Reign story.
Mhm.
But there was also the Trial of the Century, which is the White Tigers trial, which is an adaptation from Michael Bendis.
Oh yeah, yeah, Bendis.
Yeah, and the Punisher fanboys also comes from some Frank Castle stories, multiple ones where Frank eventually does track down and kill them there.
I want to
Yeah,
see that.
no,
I
no
want to see
spoilers
that
to,
so bad.
yeah, but there was one panel that was a rather ham-fisted one where Frank Castle just lectures some Punisher fanboys among the police, and generally the response was very mocking of that because if Frank Castle is pissed at you, the very least you're going to walk away with a few broken bones.
Right, you're gonna be hospitalized if not dead.
Yes,
Like
it actually been
strongly
be dead.
worded, like that's
Yeah.
a body swap episode.
Yes.
You know.
Thing to admire Captain America is like Frank Castle does not deliver PSAs.
Right, right. Oh, cat's
No,
getting
no,
her
Frank Castle
lunch.
delivers them. Yeah, but I do think that it is an interesting case there that Matt in the TV show, as played by Charlie Cox, is always tempted toward the violence and the permanent solutions and killing there. He doesn't actually want to be Matt Murdock, the lawyer. He does that because his better nature, and that's perhaps the only show in or even piece of fiction in history where being a lawyer draws you to your better nature. I mean, maybe To Kill a Mockingbird.
See, here's the problem with that interpretation of being a lawyer, because I have met many lawyers that do and practice law because they want to do good. You know, it is very much a stereotype, type, and I would say a harmful one to a certain degree, that lawyers are demonized like this. And I would argue that it's somewhat it's propaganda, basically, because what do the police typically do whenever they apprehend you? They try to force a confession 9 times out of 10, especially if you're a person of color. They, like, I watched this documentary. I think it was I'm trying to remember what it was called. But basically, this woman, it was like a Gone Girl situation. She disappeared. Her boyfriend said she was kidnapped, and the cops immediately thought that it was the boyfriend. But it turned out that her story was true. The cops labeled her a liar, claiming that this is a Ben Affleck movie or whatnot, who was also Daredevil, by the way. And that it completely ruined her reputation, destroyed their lives. And the cops did this because they felt that they were in the right. They never once tried to track down and actually reveal the evidence or try to figure out if this guy was telling the truth, i.e. do their jobs. And in a lot of cases, they will try to force confessions. And it's usually seen as, oh, well, if you ask for your lawyer, that makes you look pretty guilty. Lawyers are a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to say that there was a shift in the public stream of consciousness sort of thing there with Law and Order and all these other things, where the focus on the protagonists are all on them being prosecutors and the judicial system.
Right.
Every single time they're going after the guilty person. Out of like 300 episodes, maybe once they'll be wrong, but they'll get the right person at the end there, or they were a scumbag anyway.
And we know, but based on statistics, that's not the case. A lot of innocent people end up going to jail.
Oh, yes. But I was going to further say that previously, in the previous decades, the protagonists were defense lawyers.
Yeah, like My Cousin Vinny, right?
Yeah, or Matlock.
And now it's almost like the defense lawyer is being set up as, like, shown as the villain in a lot of cases, right?
The defense lawyers in cop shows and the prosecution there, it's always the antagonist then. They don't have the lawyer talking about their rights or doing it, obviously because it slows down the quote-unquote narrative,
right?
But also because they don't ever want to portray their protagonists as in the wrong or violating the rights, or because whenever they do, it's supposedly for the greater good. And this has a direct, very serious detriment to real-life views of civil liberties there, because George W. Bush used, it was Donald Rumsfeld, who used 24 to explain, this is why we do enhanced interrogation. What if there's a bomb ticking and we need the code or location or to stop it? And I'm like, then you're already fucked because George doesn't work.
Interrogation doesn't work. Yeah. And like Bush did with the, what was it, the Patriot Act?
Yeah.
And more stuff in that direction post 9/11 bullshit. There is a strong argument that we are in the position that we're in right now because of 9/11 and everything, the domino effect there. But I'd say it goes further back than that, with Reagan and trickle-down economics for the economic disparity and whatnot.
The effect of, like, every as much as you want to blame the current politician for how bad things are there, it was probably the guy exactly before him, a couple of presidencies before him, and a couple of presidencies before him, and then once it's normalized, it never goes away there. Once the Patriot Act is signed, no president is ever going to sign away their power.
Right. Until the people rise up and force them to.
Yes, and one of the things the Founding Fathers never quite amused, with so many Americans being behind the loss of liberties in this kind of situation there. Democracy suffers greatly when part of the problem is the people.
Yeah, it's about 30 million people who are MAGA right now.
And and we're getting into one, but going back to Daredevil for a second, one of the things I like about Born Again is when they're doing these little cutaways to the people on the street, which is being filmed by BB Urich in place of Ben
Oh
Urich.
man, when that drops, what Fisk did to Ben Urich.
Oh, I totally think that she knows, and she's preparing this big essay while pretending to kiss up to Fisk, just so she can do like, yeah, this is a mobster, and he's really doing all sorts of horrible things.
Right.
And then Daredevil will, of course, have to save her life because, of course. But the bits and pieces I really enjoy because we have all these variety of opinions, and quite a lot of them are stupid opinions.
Yeah.
Just by having thought through their opinion, there, it's like, I support vigilantes. I lived in the 70s. I know the cops are useless. And I'm like, yes, but that was like 50 years ago at this point.
Right.
And then we go this other person that says like, I like Wilson Fisk there. If he was a mobster, he knows how to get it done. And I'm like, yes, people will actually say these kind of ridiculous, ill-informed opinions because they don't think about where their opinions through nationally.
And
so much,
and it kind of highlights the other big issue. Like this has been a problem since Reagan, because Reagan was directly told, if you support education, that's just gonna create an educated proletariat. Do you really want that? So education
Right.
has been under attack by the right and the left too, in Democrats. Not really the left in America. We don't really have left-leaning politicians in America besides, AOC and Bernie Sanders, and even they are more right than you would get in, say, Germany or Britain.
I would actually say that, for all the people have been trying to rehabilitate his image there, Nixon also is responsible for so many things that
Oh yeah.
because he created the war on drugs, and we have people in his cabinet admit we did it solely so we could take away votes from blacks and hippies.
Of course.
Yes, and that led to the and Nixon came within inches of actually making a national health care system for America, and in one of the greatest misjudgments of the Democratic Party, which has quite a history of them, Ted Kennedy thought it was a trap, so he voted against it.
Yeah.
That is why the only free thing in medical history in America is dialysis, because Nixon put that through anyway.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, so let's talk about
Thank you, Ted.
what we think of the show so far, because I've been really enjoying it. Like, I've been kind of dialed out of Marvel, pretty much all of Marvel. Like, I stopped watching after Falcon and Winter Soldier. I haven't seen Captain America 4 or anything.
I saw Captain America 4. I liked it fine. It was an aggressively apolitical movie.
Yes.
Which is kind of hilarious in this, and that was the thing people noted there.
And that's the thing too. Like,
had stupid takes, but there was at least takes.
Right. I thought that was like, that discouraged me from seeing it, because I thought about reviewing it on the channel, and I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll go and see it. And then I saw, wow, it's aggressively apolitical. Isn't that kind of weird for Captain America, which is, the best Captain America movies are political thrillers.
Yes, there's no Hydra or facing the Nazis there, but I would love to hear your take on that if you actually do go and see it there, because it's such a contrast to Born Again, and Born Again very, very much is political, but it's not necessarily the anti-Trump polemic I think people were expecting from the obvious parallels. And normally I would be against that there, but Wilson Fisk isn't a Trump. He's a very
he's a very different.
He's a nuanced character. I find that hilarious.
Right, because and this is something that my wife and I were talking about. She's like, well, Wilson Fisk is smart. Trump's not. Wilson Fisk is eloquent. He's smart. He knows how to get things done. He's manipulative, and Trump is manipulative, and he does know how to rally a crowd. But I'm sorry.
Wilson is that I was going to say both of them come from shitty fathers, but Wilson Fisk is actually a self-made man who comes from an abusive household that he
Right.
resists in. Then
Right. He didn't
he,
have
I
daddy's money.
yeah, something to the effect of like Wilson Fisk can probably turn 200,000 the $1 million into a $1 billion fortune there, while Trump turned it into $1 billion debt.
Right. Like I think every
Yeah,
business he even
I
Trump
think
even managed to bankrupt a fucking casino. Like how do you do that?
oh, this is a special thing there. I've mentioned a couple of times there. I come from a somewhat privileged background. I don't actually allude to how privileged, but the fact is, my mother was good friends with Marla Maples.
Oh wow.
Yes, in the country club set there is, and actually know the secret of the bankrupted casino.
Oh, okay. Do tell.
Yes, it was passed from Marla Maples to my mother, who passed it down to me there. So, if you actually want to know how Donald J. Trump bankrupted a casino, it's actually because he and the mob, who were investors in that particular project there, were both running through some financial difficulties cash wise. And it turns out a casino is very good for getting yourself enough cash to throw around and maintain your lifestyle without anyone checking the numbers.
Hmm,
So it really was a case of mass embezzlement being what finally put put the Trump casino underwater.
that makes sense.
Yes.
That makes so much sense.
Yes, it wasn't. There wasn't some secret managing of stupidity. It was
Yeah.
just like sticking your hand in the cookie jar and taking too many out.
I mean, that is management stupidity right there.
Well, Trump understands every possible loophole there is there. In this case, it's like, well, my casino went bankrupt. I didn't go bankrupt. And when you play the, always play with other people's money.
Right? All right. Well, so how would you rate Daredevil Born Again so far?
Well, it's a tough call there because the Trial of the Century is one of my all-time favorite Daredevil stories there. But they went through that really well, really quickly,
Mhm.
and we haven't reached the climax to a lot of these stories there. It feels like a very slow burn. I'm going to go say 7 or 8 out of 10, which is not as good as on an individual level as the original Daredevil series, but it's very much better than what Disney has been putting out recently.
Yeah, it is loads better.
And I'm going to
I'd give
say
it a
I think this,
7.5, I think.
yeah, and I'm going to
Unless
go
it
say
finishes really strong, it could always,
I
screw up the landing too. You never
I'm
know.
going to actually say that I think it's probably going to end when I see the whole of the jigsaw puzzle. I'm going to probably give it like maybe an 8 or 9,
Right.
rather than the set. But right now, I understand people's frustrations a little bit there. This is very slow, Matt. If not, I will rarely give a compliment to Disney's executives, but I'm going to give them 2 points here. One, it was good to let this come out with as strong political stances as it has so far.
Mhm.
But two, it was also correct that definitely we needed the reshoots that included Bullseye, Foggy dying, and the little bit with Deborah Ann Wall, who is just my absolute favorite. Because we needed at least some Daredevil before it spends like 5 or 6 episodes out of costume.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like and for the people that are inevitably going to comment, man, I wish my media wasn't political. It's always been political, man. This whole thing about your media not being political, we need to go back to that or anything, is absolute bullshit. Some of the best stories in fiction, 1984, fucking the X-Men, you name it, and they probably have a political message behind them. Sure,
Yeah,
they
there's
might not be as overt because shit hasn't ever been this bad. Well, it has, but for us at least, like
yeah.
millennials especially have lived through so many unprecedented times that it's really getting fucking old at this point.
Oh yeah, it's kind of funny there. If I ever were going to watch a movie that was bound to piss both of us off, it would be Reality Bites by Winona Ryder and Ethan Hawke. Yeah, because I love that movie. That movie's message is kind of fascinating. It's like, well, the Cold War is over. There's nothing to worry about now.
Right.
Just meandering. It's like our lives are just so boring,
Yeah.
and it's and that's, and just a few years later, 9/11 and everything after that.
A lot of right-wing dipshits, pundits mostly, would right at the beginning of this whole Trump thing in 2015-ish, around there, they would say things like, the reason why these like crybaby SJWs are so angry is because they've never had to struggle for anything. They've never had a great struggle the way that people did in World War II, and now look where we are. That's not true, though. We've had struggles our entire lives. The shit's been fucked up since the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, everyone, and this includes MAGA, too. They understand that something is fucked up. That's why they want such radical change. And I would argue that we wouldn't be here in this position if Bernie Sanders hadn't been snubbed by the DNC in 2016 as the running candidate.
Well, I'm an anarchist, and I'm about as far left politically as you can go there. But here's the thing I'll also say. I feel like sometimes a lot of my fellow left politicals also have a belief that America has a lot larger leaning toward progressive than they do there. I think Bernie Sanders is the guy who understands what we need radical change-wise more than any other politician, and at least has the will, unlike a vast majority of so-called left in America. But I also feel like him selling it to the majority of Americans who don't necessarily want radical change there, but they want guarantees that they're not going to be eating out of a dumpster.
Well, and here's the thing. Here's where I think you're a bit wrong on that. And it's because, specifically, look, Republicans are pissed off right now. They're pissed off. They're at these town halls. They're screaming at MAGA politicians to the point where they're basically not holding those town halls, and Democrats are now. Yeah. But AOC and Bernie Sanders held a rally recently. They got 34,000 people to attend. 34,000 people to attend this Stop the Oligarchy tour. So people are waking up and realizing, because it's not progressive policies that are unpopular. They're very popular. New Deal style policies are the most popular style policies. Republican policies, when they're stripped of all the propaganda and whatnot, are the least popular. When you just show them, show a voter what the policy is, the plain language behind it, and what it does, they're going to choose the progressive policy. They are extremely popular. That is what people want, but they can't put it into words because there's so much noise.
I was going to say, going back to Daredevil for one more point, one plot line I am looking for that I will not spoil too much there is the upcoming appearance of Muse, who is another character who has strong political associations, especially during the Devil's Reign, that I wonder how deep they'll get into in Born Again, because he's basically serial killer Banksy.
Huh. Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yes, he's a very much a voice of the people, but a violent dystopian one, and seeing what he tries to bring as a message will be interesting. That's all, without spoilers.
I also see White Tiger's niece picking up the mantle, or I think it's his niece. Or is it his daughter?
Young for it there, because the White Tiger in the comics was already an FBI agent. So
yeah, but
this one looks like
in the
young Avenger.
One of the recent Spider-Man animated series, she was a teenager.
Yeah, that actually led to the creation of two female White Tigers, which is kind of funny there.
Huh.
One being the niece and one being the sister, and I think it's weirdly the sister who is the younger one.
Oh, interesting. All right. Well, yeah, so Daredevil Born Again. So far, best thing that Disney Marvel has put out as a show, at least, on their platform. So you should check it out.
Yeah, I definitely am enjoying this. Matt and Wilson are doing their damnedest to integrate into a much stranger, funnier world. And I will say that Daredevil Born Again justifies itself purely with that we built that city on rock and roll of this.
And just seeing Wilson Fisk's fucking disdainful expression. It's great.
Absolutely.
Anyway, big thanks to Charles for stopping by. You can check his books out in the links down below, found in the description, as well as everything else that was mentioned in the show today. Yeah, we'll go ahead and see you next time.